This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Coming up on the show, Bill Gates, who spent years spreading insane climate alarmism like this.
The world emits over 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases. And as we keep doing that, the consequences for human life will be catastrophic.
Catastrophic? Well, he has now backflipped on climate change. Also, she's back. Kamala Harris sits down for an interview with an Australian journalist, and it might be her worst one yet.
Of course not. I wouldn't have written a book if I didn't want to be on record about that. So that's a curious question.
Joining us now is newsroom editor at Unheard, James Billow. James, thank you for joining us. Let's start with New York City, where Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani is likely to be elected mayor of the city next week. President Donald Trump has tweeted, the more people learn about Mamdani, the less they like him, and that has to be true. I mean, his agenda is so far left. He's called to defund the police. Earlier this week, he suggested that his family, that they were the real victims of the September 11 terror attack that killed 3,000 people. He wants rent freezes, and there are now real estate experts sounding the alarm over what's going to happen to townhouse owners if Mamdani gets in. Yet the polls have Mamdani well in front of Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa. What's this week been like for you over in New York City, and can I get your take on what's going on here?
Fundamentally, it's been a pretty depressing few days for those of us who are not supporting Zohran Mamdani. What I will say, though, is that the last 24 hours has given me a bit of hope. The polls do seem to be tightening just a little bit in Cuomo's direction, and that's why we've seen ex-mayor Michael Bloomberg double down and actually give $1.5 million to the Cuomo campaign. So it's a long shot, but I'm not giving up hope yet. I think what we're seeing at the moment is all these clips starting to resurface, and it's just a reminder to voters of just how ugly some of the rhetoric that Zohran Mamdani has danced around with over the past few years. There was a police quote as well, something about the NYPD having their laces tied by the IDF or something ridiculous like that. And it's these kind of comments that just do not fill me with any kind of faith in New York's potentially next mayor. We hear a lot about how he's changed, he's pivoted to the center, he's a reform character. But I just don't believe it. I have no trust in this man. And I have to say the next few days are going to be very, very tense over here.
Absolutely. Well, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has made a pitch to every New York police officer who are thinking about leaving. Let's take a look.
It is going to come back and bite the city. He is so far left, and he mixes his leftism with Islamism. He's going to make the de Blasio years look like the golden age. And I can tell you in Florida, we're affected by this just with the law enforcement alone. If you're working at NYPD, do you want to go out there and risk your life knowing that the mayor hates you? No, a lot of them are not going to want to do that. And in Florida, we've established a $5,000 recruitment bonus. So if you are somebody that doesn't want to serve under that guy as mayor, you come to Florida, any state or local law enforcement agency, you get $5,000 right at the top.
James, I think a lot of people are going to be fleeing to Florida.
I think you're exactly right. And let's not forget that this election is the start of November. It's about to get very chilly. I think a lot of people wouldn't mind a trip down to Florida. But DeSantis is clearly aware of the effect of Mamdani's campaign on the morale of the new NYPD. We have just lived through, in a matter of years, the BLM period, the defund era, in which the morale of the police across the country dropped, it cratered. And what we saw in response to that was soaring crime, particularly in those areas where defund was at its most prevalent. We are seeing a repeat of that already. And first as tragedy, then as fast. And I just don't know why we are sleepwalking into another disaster with this kind of thing happening.
Well, someone who is a fan of Zohran Mamdani is Liberal podcaster Jennifer Welch. She's gone on this rant praising Mamdani, and she's also a fan of Liberals who celebrate the murder of Charlie Kirk. On her podcast, she played this clip of a woman at the No Kings rally and laughed as a woman was celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder. Look at this.
I'm sorry I took AIPAC money, atonement tour, if you want to stay in power. Stop missing out on these big rallies Hakeem and Chuck should have been front and center introducing the next mayor of New York City, but no, they wouldn't show up because they're that are beholden to the same corporations that helped Donald Trump get elected. And this is just an embarrassment. Kudos to Bernie, to AOC, to Zoran. And that woman out in somewhere middle America saying, Charlie Kirk, he was a racist, he was a piece of shit. We want politicians to speak freely and look at what the benefit is. Look at what is happening in New York. And you are sitting on the sidelines, running your social media like complete dorks. It's embarrassing. Get your together, Hakeem and Chuck. Seriously.
James, I mean, I watched that and I just instantly think of Erica Kirk, who's just lost her husband, the father of her children, and is right now addressing a massive Turning Point USA event honouring Charlie Kirk. Can I get your reaction to Jennifer's comments there?
I mean, it's truly sickening, and one of the most troubling, if not the most troubling, developments of 2025 has been this normalization of violence and this normalization about rhetoric around murder and death and killing. And I just hate to see how this is being mainstreamed in parts of the left. It's a really, really ugly development. Now, I don't exactly know what this woman's motives were. I'd never heard of her before, and hopefully I'll never hear of her again. But it is so important at a time like this where the atmosphere is so febrile that these are exactly the type of voices we don't listen to and we drown out completely, because that is a really skewed, sick motive. And I really hope that Erica doesn't have to hear that.
Absolutely. Well, let's listen to Erica Kirk as she addresses this Turning Point USA event.
You guys have no idea how helpful it is to have all of you in my life, because you help me feel even more deeply connected to my husband. And I thank you for that. I thank all of you for that.
I mean, you listen to Erica Kirk there, and then you listen to Jennifer Welch. You just cannot even compare when it comes to dignity, to class, and to grace. But Vice President J.D. Vance is joining Erica Kirk at this Turning Point USA event at the University of Mississippi, keeping Charlie Kirk's mission going. And J.D. Vance was also asked about a potential 2028 White House run on the Pod Force One podcast with Miranda Devine, insisting that there's no tension between himself and Marco Rubio. Listen to this.
First of all, no, there's not going to be any tension. Marco is my best friend in the administration. He and I work a lot together. Right. And we really do, I think, a lot of the good work that we've been able to do as an administration is because we're all able to work together. And again, this is why I say worrying too much about the politics actually, I think, makes you worse at the job that you have. I never want to wake up. And so far, I've never woken up and thought to myself, how do I make myself president of the United States? What I wake up and think to myself is, how do I do a good job as vice president? And I think Marco Rubio asks himself, how do I do a good job as Secretary of State? And that should be the question that each of us keeps on asking ourselves.
James, it's interesting. Vance is certainly dominating the polls when it comes to the 2028 presidential race.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, I agree with the fact that there are no tensions with Rubio, and I do think they do have a strong relationship. I think he's maybe not being completely honest about the fact that he's thinking about the presidency in 2028 and has no ambition for that whatsoever. But look, that tag team, Rubio and Vance, is going to be one of the most destructive in Republican politics. They are a real force to be reckoned with. Now, there will be a bit of a contest in 2028 as to who gets to lead and who has to play the bit part role. But I suspect if one of those men can put their ego aside, then that could be another 8 years in the White House for the Republicans. The last thing I'll say is, it may not even be in their hands. I suspect Trump will want to anoint a successor. He still has a huge amount of sway over the party. He wouldn't even want to be thinking about this just yet. But I suspect whoever he chooses to anoint, if he does so choose to anoint, then that person will go on to become the leader of the Republican Party.
James, J.D. Vance was also asked about what a vice president actually does, and he said that he was jealous of Kamala Harris because she appeared to do not much at all. And of course, the former vice president Kamala Harris has sat down for an interview on Australia's ABC's news channel, and she was giving word salad after word salad. Listen to one of them.
You say in the book that it was reckless for you not to intervene on that decision to run again, given the stakes. How could you leave the decision to Joe Biden and Joe Biden?
As I write, and this book really is about it's candid. I offer a lot of candor around my what I did and what I believe I could have done and should have done differently, and what was at play overall.
James, you just think about how many times Kamala Harris has been asked this question about Joe Biden, and she still doesn't have a clear answer.
Oh, Gabby, I just want you to make sure that you knew she's being candid. I hope that point was made.
I might have missed that.
Look, Woodrow Wilson, he was a president about 100 or so years ago, and he said that the vice presidential role was basically unimportant until you cease to be the vice president. And what he meant by that was that's when the president dies or has to leave office, and the vice president no longer becomes vice president, and he is the president. Kamala Harris, for 4 years, was a heartbeat away from the full presidency. Now, when you speak like that, and you know what the question's going to be, and you've been asked this question 100 times every single month, not even after the book tour, during the book tour, and before the book tour, how she can't provide a better answer than that, it absolutely beggars belief. And I know she's been flirting with another presidential run. I cannot think of anything worse for the Democratic Party than for her to run again. In fact, I would suggest, as my piece of advice to the Democratic Party, no Californians, no Gavin Newsom, no Kamala Harris, and no Nancy Pelosi. And I think the party will be in a much better shape.
Well, we have heard from Nancy Pelosi. Apparently the No Kings rallies that were held in the United States are actually not political. Listen to this.
Because I see the Democrats every day. You saw a march that was not political. And the value of it was that it wasn't political. No King's Day. It was spontaneous, organic, but everybody was there. And that's what's important, is what are the people thinking? What are they hopeful about? What are they willing to get out the vote for?
Oh, James, I must have got that wrong. Wasn't political at all.
I would love to just spend a day in Nancy Pelosi's head just to figure out what she sees, because No Kings, was that meant to be some kind of reference to King Charles or something? I don't understand. If this wasn't a political rally or a Republican rally, then what on earth was it? It was obviously a Democrat rally. And yes, there were a lot of groups behind it. I think Arabella, one of these Democratic networks, sent something like over $70 million to funding this activity. So look, it wasn't organic. I saw the posters all over the streets in New York in the first 3 weeks in the build up to it. So the fact that this was organic or spontaneous, I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. I don't know where she's getting that from.
Finally, let's talk about Bill Gates, because after decades of fear-mongering around climate change and telling us that the world was on the brink of unimaginable peril due to rising global temperatures, contributing to this climate anxiety that many, many young people suffer from, he's told everyone, actually calm down. He now says that climate change will not lead to humanity's demise, and of course a stunning reversal. But let's just look back at some of his previous comments.
The world emits over 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases. And as we keep doing that, the consequences for human life will be catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Well, he now says, although climate change will have serious consequences, particularly for people in the poorest countries, it will not lead to humanity's demise. James, what's going on here? What's with the backflip?
Well, this is quite the about turn for a man who said about 10 years ago that carbon emissions would create tens of millions of climate refugees across the world. That clearly has not come to light. And all I can say is that I'm glad that Bill Gates has finally seen some sense in this. But the effects of his rhetoric and this climate alarmism will be felt for many decades to come. I don't think you would have had a Greta Thunberg without someone like Bill Gates in the first place. Because when you are trading in this kind of alarmist rhetoric, it's going to fuel a millenarian response from people like Greta Thunberg. And what does that do? It completely hinders any kind of coherent environmental response to what's going on the planet. So yes, I'm glad Bill Gates is finally seeing some sense in this, but the effects of his rhetoric and his policies are going to be felt for many years to come.
Yeah, you're not wrong. James Billow, newsroom editor at Unheard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's time for Media Meltdowns, and this one you don't want to miss. As we've seen for some time now, former Vice President Kamala Harris is on her book tour to promote and sell copies of the book about herself, and she'll tell you, it's tiring stuff.
Hello. Hello. Nice to meet you again.
Nice to meet you again. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. And 4 hours sleep. I'm fine. This trip is, it just takes a day.
Yes, that is how the interview began when Kamala Harris sat down with ABC's Sarah Ferguson, and Kamala telling Australians that she's the new Sleepy Joe. Kamala was asked about what it felt like to lose the election, and her answer, just wait for it, it's profound.
You say it's not about losing, but losing is awful.
Losing what is what I would propose.
Pointing her finger. Kamala goes on to give the same answers that she's given on all American media outlets, that she lost the election because she needed more time, ignoring the fact that Americans had seen plenty of her during her time as vice president. And Kamala managed to dodge every question about Joe Biden and his obvious decline, and she didn't like being pressed on it.
I want to interrupt you because that is a world-class pivot, but it is not the question that I asked you, which is about Joe Biden's failure to recognise his own frailties and what that did to you. The question is about Joe Biden. Are you still reluctant to criticise the former president?
In what regard, please?
Well, just in terms of that question. So you went
What exactly would you like to ask? Be more specific, if you don't mind.
Was it Joe Biden's decision, his failure to recognise his own frailties in that position, that put you in the position that made it almost impossible to win that race?
He was not frail as president of the United States.
No.
But he had frailties. We all saw the debate.
I do believe that Joe Biden had the capacity to be president of the United States.
Biden? Frailties? What frailties? None at all. Although Kamala Harris had no issue criticising Joe Biden in her book, she just couldn't handle being asked about it during that interview.
I was upset about it, as I write about in the book. Yes.
I just sense a slight reluctance to go there, to put those words. It's one thing writing them in the book. Are you unwilling or reluctant to have your criticisms of Joe Biden, as frank as they are in the book, on tape, on camera?
Of course not. I wouldn't have written a book if I didn't want to be on record about that.
So
that's a curious question.
It's a curious question. Kamala Harris was so uncomfortable in the interview. She essentially demands that Sarah Ferguson just stops asking about Joe Biden altogether, to stop asking questions.
Well, no, I just thought I could detect a difference between what the strength of the language, the clarity, you saying hurt and disappointed.
Well, here's the thing. I wrote a book that the book is not about Joe Biden. So a lot of your questions have been about Joe Biden, and I would really like to talk about the book in full. I'm happy to directly answer any question you ask, but the book is not about Joe Biden.
No.
Oh, poor Kamala. She was there to promote her book. She's got better things to be doing than talking about the Joe Biden cover-up. But in that interview that can only be described as a train wreck, really, Kamala Harris, she got what she wanted, and she was asked about the book and what on earth it actually offers.
It's important, as I write in the book, to keep in mind it was the closest presidential election in the 21st century in America.
No, it wasn't. Kamala lost the popular vote in all 7 swing states in what was a decisive victory for Donald Trump, and thank God for that. Joining us now is Michael Kroger, former president of the Victorian Liberal Party and Sky News contributor. Thank you so much for joining us. Kamala Harris, she keeps trying to rewrite history, lying about how close it was, when in fact it was a much closer election result in 2000 when Al Gore won the popular vote, yet George W. Bush won the Electoral College vote. In 1960, JFK won the popular vote by 0.17 percentage points against Richard Nixon. Kamala, she lost the popular vote, all 7 swing states, and she has nothing else to offer us but spin.
No, she's got absolutely nothing to offer. Well, look, there's several things you can say. First of all, in terms of the 2028 election, if you look at the bookmakers' odds, public opinion polls, she's only the 6th favoured candidate amongst the Democrats. Starts off with Newsom, AOC, Shapiro, Pritzker, Buttigieg, and then Kamala Harris. So even amongst Democrat supporters, they rate her incredibly lowly. And the reason for that is she was a shocking vice president. She was a terrible candidate. And if you look at what Trump's said and what he's doing, the borders, which is an extraordinary achievement, cracking down on crime in these democratic cities, stopping the flow of illegal drugs and fentanyl into America, whether it's from Venezuela or Mexico or other Latin American countries. The peace deals he's done with other countries, freeing the hostages out of Gaza, bringing jobs to America, massive investment into America, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Boy, that's a pretty substantial list of achievements. And if you put that against Joe Biden's achievements, of which there were very few. So Harris was a terrible candidate. She's not really associated with any successes. You can't say the Biden presidency was great for A, B, and C reasons. And I thought it was, look, as I'm getting older, Gabriella, 30 minutes is a long time in your life. And that's 30 minutes of my life I will not get back, watching that vacuous babble about Joe Biden. Yeah. Saying that she sat in all these meetings with Biden and didn't notice any decline at all. What? I mean, to say those things is an insult to the American public. Who could see that Joe Biden wasn't fit. And it took George Clooney, of all people, to say, listen, Joe, time to nick off.
Let's talk about Donald Trump. He's on the final leg of his Asia tour, and it's resulted in a historic peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia, transformative trade and investment agreements with Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, and here he is in South Korea.
When America thrives, our partners thrive, and our alliances thrive with all of the countries. The Indo-Pacific thrives, and that's good for all of us. And the entire world becomes safer and wealthy and greater than ever before. We get along with a lot of countries. We solved a lot of wars and a lot of problems, and that's all good for all of us. The extraordinary American turnaround that I've just described has been achieved not by just continuing business as usual back in Washington.
Michael, although Donald Trump clearly puts America first and he has an American first agenda, that doesn't mean America alone. What do you make of his Asia tour?
Well, again, very successful. I thought his meeting in Japan was extraordinary, re-emphasising the close relationship between America and Japan, Malaysia, now South Korea. This guy is very different to every other US president we've seen, apart maybe from Clinton. Trump uses his personal and American muscle, right? He swings a bat around the world and he's getting things done. He's not for this soft touch diplomacy done through bureaucrats and diplomats. He uses the muscle of the American economy and the American military like no other president I've ever seen. Clinton had extraordinary personal skills, but this guy, you know, through his charm and charisma, if you want to call it that, and the bat he's carrying, gets these countries to submit to the will of the Americans. And I think what he's done in some of these wars has been extraordinary. I mean, the Congo war that he helped resolve was extraordinary. That nasty conflict with Rwanda had been going on for a long time. And of course, in Gaza, the crowning achievement, getting the hostages out. So he's very different to any other president we've seen, and so far in international relations, he's been extraordinarily successful. If you put that record against any other modern president, he's well ahead of anybody. No one rates compared to what Trump's done on the international stage, Gab.
Well, you won't get that kind of assessment that you've just given on outlets like MSNBC. And when I was looking to do my Media Meltdown segment this week, I was looking at this meltdown from MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell, who can't handle that there's just one conservative on CNN, who is, of course, Scott Jennings. Listen to this.
And now CNN eagerly pays a Trump supporter to lie on CNN every day and night for Donald Trump. CNN did this during the first Trump presidential campaign and presidency. CNN regularly paid Trump supporters to lie about Trump on CNN, but the CNN regime then realized that was a mistake. And they stopped doing it. They stopped paying for lies. But then CNN got a new head. The head of CNN for the last 3 years, hired by the Trump-supporting owner and operator of CNN, is an Englishman who thinks paying Scott Jennings to lie about Donald Trump is money very well spent. Scott Jennings, who used to be an aide to Senator Mitch McConnell, was not always a rabid, lying Trump supporter. When he first started appearing on television, he was capable of criticizing some of the more extreme Trump positions, but Scott Jennings figured out where the money is and how he could get his own podcast and decided to become the J.D. Vance of CNN.
I mean, the TDS is just off the charts. It's not like CNN is balanced. It has one conservative, and thank God for Scott Jennings.
Well, look, what's happening in the American media is this. You've got the Democratic Party going to the hard left, and MSNBC have decided to cash in on that. They are the broadcaster for the hard left in America now. So now they're attacking CNN, who are hardly pro-Trump. So
exactly.
what that guy's trying to do is become, the home for all the American left freak show. And as you say, to criticise CNN for having one supporter, and of course, if you agree with Trump, you're a liar. I mean, seriously. So this is the problem with MSNBC. Their own ratings, of course, are down enormously over the last few years. Fox have gone up incredibly strongly, and they've just decided they're the home of the hard left. Now, going back to what we were saying before, the problem for Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and Pritzker, the more moderate, sensible, Clinton-esque, political descendants of Bill Clinton, and the sort of more sensible, mainstream, moderate, rational Kennedy wing of the Democratic Party is, that the Democratic Party itself, the membership have gone mad left. Stations like MSNBC have gone mad left, and they're going to support, an AOC type candidate. Bernie Sanders is probably too old now, but they're going to endorse a hard left candidate against JD Vance because that's their home now. They're gravitating to the extreme left because moderate positions are not drawing any ratings in America.
Michael, let's just turn to news in Australia. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison has made an intervention on the coalition's issues with net zero, saying that net zero at any cost on a rigid timetable is not policy but ideology. It's interesting, this also comes just as Bill Gates, who spent decades fear-mongering around climate change, has now backflipped, saying that climate change will not lead to humanity's demise. So it seems like more and more people are kind of getting a bit of common sense when it comes to climate change. But what do you make of Scott Morrison's comments and what it means for the coalition's position?
Well, I thought Scott was absolutely correct. It is an ideology. I mean, most people don't know what net zero means here in Australia. They sort of grab this phrase and say, oh, yes, we agree with it. It's become part of the religion here. The more thinking people like the idea of a net zero increase in emissions, but say, well, hang on, it can't come at any cost. It can't come at booming prices, particularly for electricity. And so what we're seeing around the world, not just here, but in Britain and Germany, other countries, is people saying, look, we like it as an objective, but it is sending our countries deep, deep, deep into debt. It's killing the chances of the working middle class to pay their bills. And so you're seeing a market correction. The problem the coalition's got here in Australia is that having introduced net zero in 2021, we're now actually trying to tell people, no, now we're against it. And that's politically a very difficult argument. It takes several years to sort of explain to people why you're now changing your mind. It's a sophisticated argument. And so the coalition here are being bedeviled a bit by our own history, because as I said, it was only 4 years ago that we first introduced this policy, which the nation then grabbed.
Finally, Michael, Victoria's crime crisis isn't getting any better. Just in the space of 48 hours at the start of the week, there was a string of violent incidents in Melbourne, including a knife attack. There are, of course, growing calls for intervention from the Victorian government. Yet the Premier, Jacinta, she insists that everything is fine.
Well, of course, she's a member of the hard left of the Labor Party. She's like sort of members of the hard left of these Democratic-run cities in America that pretend crime doesn't exist. She gives press conferences, despite the fact people are hit with machetes and knives all around Melbourne. She says, no, Melbourne's safe. There's sort of zombie interviews where she's saying things which are completely unbelievable, and people just look at her and shake their heads. So Victoria's basically lawless these days. People get caught, they get bail, they get caught again, they get bail. I mean, it's a very soft bail regime we have here in Victoria. And one of the things the opposition tried to do here was to bring in a law to stop people wearing masks at demonstrations. A lot of these demonstrations are violent. They have terrorist flags, terrorist symbols. Nazis are at these demonstrations. And so to put these people to their proof, the opposition tried to bring in a policy in the parliament yesterday to say, if you're going to demonstrate, you can't go with a mask. Well, the Labor Party opposed that. So that shows you how serious they are about bringing people to account for some of the violence that happens at these demonstrations. And we have a massive, massive law and order problem here in Victoria, and it seems to be getting worse.
Michael Kroger, former president of the Victorian Liberal Party and Sky News contributor, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Gab.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.